device, or if you are like in any other like a tab or an iPad, so you do not need any of the installation. So the size which PWA has is very less. So compared to if you install an application, it might be about maybe 700 MB or 600 MB, or considering it's a not that high or heavy app, it can be around 200 to 300 MB. But still, with a PWA, it can only take up to maybe 30, 40 MB or max 100 MB. So yeah, that takes up a lot less size. And because the size is mostly of your cache, so there are dynamic cache, there are static cache. So the caching basically takes up the size, and we'll talk about that. So later, a little later in this slide. So yeah, I'm not going to focus too much on the slide. So we have a demo. We're going to do that. We're going to see the practical usage. So yeah, so you do not need any app store or Play Store, so that is why it's so nice to have a PWA. And then of course it is easy to share. So you just share the link, and if both of you have the PWA installed, then you can just directly connect with your PWAs, or you have the web API, the what do you call that, the web share API basically. So if you have the web share API, you can just share it on a Facebook or any other social media websites, and then people will be able to access your PWA. Awesome. Now, what makes them different is you can see a lot of companies here and their testimonial basically. So Uber's PWA was designed to be fast even on 2G. So the main point about working with PWA is, like I mentioned, it has to be fast, reliable, and it's offline. So PWA, which Uber made, was working on 2G, so PWA gives you access to even low-end devices. Like if you want to run things pretty smooth and fast in even in places where you do not have good network, then PWA is the way to go. So Uber did that because Uber wants to scale up. So they created a PWA which was faster even on 2G. And the app size is only 50K gzipped. So you can see that why I mentioned that the PWA sizes can differ and can be much less and compared to what you have the original application size. And yeah, it's faster, so it takes less than 3 seconds to load on 2G networks. And so there's Trivago, there's Petlov, and yeah, a lot of companies have this testimonial. We can go ahead and read it out. Now, the first point about making your PWA nice and scalable is you have to make them responsive, because if you don't make them responsive, since it's your application, like your application will be installed on different end devices, right? So you have to make it responsive. That's the first thing. Now, this is the application which we're going to do a demo on today. So this is an application I created, which is called Mix Central. This is basically like a music pad. So you have these how many? A6. You have these 6 blocks, and the blocks emit music. So they individually have a certain audio clip attached to each of them, and then you can just mix different music and like click on the tabs, and the tabs will create music. So we are going to, I need to share the system audio as well for you to be able to hear. But anyway, I'll do that later. So we are going to make this one today, and we are not going to focus on the HTML CSS part because I already have it up and running. So you can just get the code at the end of the session. So for now, just focus on how you can make it converted into a PWA. So what I have already prepared is a basic HTML, CSS, and JavaScript thing. So you have a basic web app ready. It's not converted to a PWA yet. That is what we are going to do tonight. So we have it responsive. So the mobile view looks like this, the web view looks like this, and it even has a tab view, so you can go and check it out. So what's the first thing which is very, very important is your manifest file. Now, why is manifest file required? Now, let me go back and yeah. So a manifest file contains your application name, it contains your icon, and the endpoint URLs like the start URL, the end URL, and all that. Not the end URL, the start URL, and the scope of your application, and the control theme color. So basically, what should be the theme color of your application, what should be the background color, and all that. So maybe the name, like the short name of your application, the main name of your application, the different dimensions of the icons, like you have favicons, which can matter differently based on where you're installing it. So for example, if you're installing it on an Android device, it should be, I think, 192 cross 192. So the different resolutions matter. So you need to create your application in such a way that you have different icons available just for the sole reason of making it scalable. And yeah, so what kind of a display it can have. Now the display thing is pretty important. So this is one property which is which holds a lot of value in the manifest file. And the manifest file mainly is like a configuration file. So whatever application you're making, your application has to have a configuration, right? So you need to configure your application first. So that is where manifest comes in. Now it's a JSON file, so everything you write will be in the form of a JSON. Now I'll give you a demo how it looks, and we are also going to build it simultaneously while we are going through the slides. Okay, so this is how it looks. So you have a name, Mixcentro. So this is like the one I previously created. So it already has the name of Mixcentro. Now it has a short name, a theme color background, and the display, which is a standalone right now. I'm going to talk about in much detail what the display is after this particular slide. So the way you can make your manifest file is using a manifest generator, which is, I'll give you a link. Basically, you can go to Google and search for manifest generator, and you'll get tons of it. But there's one particular manifest generator, which I like. So I'll give the link to that, and it's in the slides, and you'll see in a few minutes. Or you can create your own. So you need to just create a manifest or JSON file in your application, and then you can just type it out. So I think that is what I'm going to do, but I'm also going to show you the link, which is this one basically. So app-manifest.firebase app.com. This is created by Firebase. So this is something which I really like because they have the icon as well. So you can choose what icon you want, and you can just put the icon, and they'll give you the perfect icon which you want for your web app. But they previously they used to ship a lot of icons, like they used to give you a lot of resolutions for the same icon. Now they only give one. So I think they focus on the favicon now, but you can change it. So you can basically scale the resolutions of your icons up and down. So yeah, we are going to look at that. But first, we're going to look into the display. So the display is pretty important because it holds a lot of crucial information about how your PWA will look. So this is the property, the main property, which decides how your PWA should look. Now there are 4 modes, which are standalone, full screen, minimal UI, and browser. So what a standalone is let me go to the next one. So the standalone is your normal PWA, which has the windowed, maybe it made like a borderless approach to it. So you will get rid of any default navigation, I would say. So if you have like a navigation bar or something, you'll get rid of that, and you'll get a windowed approach to it. So for example, consider Spotify. So if you have opened or downloaded or used the Spotify Windows or Spotify Mac, then you'll see that it opens like in a windowed format. So that is how your application will look if you do a display of standalone. Now, if you do a display of standalone and you open your application anywhere, whether you're working on a Windows, on a Mac, on Linux, or like an Android device, so you will get this kind of a bordered bordered design to your application when you install your particular PWA. So that is why standalone is the most the most go-to solution when people try to make PWAs. Now the next one is full screen. So what full screen does is gets rid of your navigation and also the borderless, the borders basically. So you will not have the basic top window and all that. So you'll just have a full screen view of it. So the name is pretty self-explanatory. Now the minimal UI is something which gives you it has like a little bit of browser approach to it. Like it gives you the link which you're currently on, like the root link of your application. So for example, if you like Twitter is a PWA, right? So if you install Twitter, you will see HTTPS and then //twitter.com at the top. So wherever you click on it and wherever you visit with reference to what you click, the link changes dynamically, and you get this this bar at the top which shows the link and also the name of the application. So that is what is the minimal UI, and this is the browser. So like if you open a normal browser in your application, in your maybe your Windows or mobile devices, so whatever natively it should look, the browser is nothing different to that. It's the same thing. So you are just basically opening it in a browser in the mobile. So it's not really a PWA, but also a PWA. So yeah, people do not go for browser or minimal UI. They basically try to go for standalone or full screen. So standalone is the one which is the most famous and which we are going to use in this one too. So yeah, I prefer this one. You can go and check it out. Now let me just close this up, and we are going to make a PWA manifest file right now. So this is the application which we have right now. So this has a basic index JS. So this is actually, let me show you let me just share my screen with the sound. So I'm just going to stop sharing for a minute and then share back. So just a minute. Yeah, I think this is visible. Okay, so if we go back now and think I need to go to, yeah, so this is it. If I open it on Chrome, no, I'll just go open it on Edge. So there you go. So this is the application, and let me move you up. So if I click on this, you'll be able to hear a sound. So this is working. Yep, this is working. So that is why I'm just going to explain a little bit about the code so that you get an idea of what it's doing. So we have basically, this is the three divs, which are the three boxes, and again, the three divs. So this is the three, where is it? So the three thingy, the three boxes, the three pads basically, and basic, just pretty basic. And then you have index.js, which is actually on clicking it, you're getting the play option. So upon clicking, upon the click event, we are playing the pads. That is why you're getting the sound. And yeah, it's really minimal project, but really does the job, and I really like it. So for the sounds to being able to play, I have already created a like predefined sound. So these are like static. So you have only these 6 sounds which are being played. So I haven't changed them. You can maybe add more, and upon you can give a set timer interval or something, and then create new sounds upon particular interval or whatever. And then I also have the icons basically. So the icons which I want for this, let me open it in this so that I can show you a bit more. So these are the icons which I already have created because I already had this project. I was already working with this project. So I have created it in different resolutions. So you have 72 cross 72, and then 96, 128, 144. So different resolutions. So I think if you install it on mobile, you will be able to see this one. So 192. And if you open it on like a windowed version, so you'll be able to see this one. And yeah, so these are like different devices for different size devices. For iPad, maybe it should be this, or yeah, it depends. So you can go ahead and like shape it out in different way in different resolutions or as you want. So this is pretty important because this will go into our manifest file. So let's just go ahead and create our manifest file right now. So I'm going to do it in our global scope. So I'm going to do manifest.json. And this is how it looks. It basically wraps it up in a JSON. So this is I'm using an extension which is uh, helping me understand what is which type of file. So for JS files, I get this. For HTML, I get this. I don't remember the name of the extension though, but yeah, it's pretty nice. So I'm going to create a name of our application first. So the name will be basically mix intro, and the short name, it should have a short name, and it should be let me just give mix intro to this as well. And the main thing, which maybe the theme color, should have a nice theme color. So I'm gonna go with a predefined theme color, which I like, which is I think it's 36060. And so these are predefined. You can go to an HTML color picker or a UI color picker, and you can choose your own, whichever color you like for your theme. And then you should have a background color of let's see, which color do I like? Maybe okay, I have one here, so it can be F08 and E88E. Yeah, so these are all hex values. You can check them out later, which value is what. And the display, which is pretty important. So the display should be standalone for my particular application. You can choose your own standalone. I think that I'm not doing any typos. Yeah. Now, basically you need a start URL as well. So the start URL actually like tells you where your application should start. Now, if I give a dot, that means my application should start at the root. You can also use a slash, and that's the same. I'm going to go with dot because dot means that your application should start from the root. Now I'm going to go and do the icons. Like I'm going to add all the icons for my project. Now, there are lots of icons. I already have the icon part written up here so that I can just copy paste the whole thing, and you will be able to see it in just a minute. There you go. So you have icon. So this is images and then icons and then icon 72 and then the size and then the type. So the type is image/png, and that goes on along for a long time. Now after this, I'm going to have the final thing, which is the splash screen, which I don't want any splash screen for my application. So this is basically I'm doing all the configurations for my application. So I'm going to do a null, and that is it. That is all you need for your PWA application manifest file. And I'm gonna go ahead and save it. So I have a manifest file up and ready. Now that is more or less what we wanted. So now let me go back to my slides and start again. Okay, now what do we require? Now we require something called as a serve. Now what is serve? Serve is a package, which is a package provided by NPM. Now we can also use Yarn, which I prefer more than NPM because NPM is a little bit slow according to me, and Yarn's performance is much better, and you do not need to write a lot of comments basically in Yarn. So I generally prefer Yarn, but for those of you who do not know what Node is or NPM is, so NPM is Node Package Manager, and Node Package Manager is like a whole bunch of library register where you get a bunch of these packages. It comes like in a form of node modules, and you get tons of packages which you can use, libraries, packages which you can use for your projects. So Serve is one of them, which actually lets you run a local server. So basically, Serve will give you a local host, which in our case, since we want our PWA to be able to, to be able to see or reflect whatever we do in our PWA, we would need to run it on a local host, because normally we will run it on the on our file. Like it won't run on HTTP right now, because if you open it, you might notice. Let me go back. You might notice that it's running on file, not on. Yeah, it's running on file, not on HTTP or localhost. Is my network bad? No, I think my network is good. Okay. Okay, yeah, I think it's good. So we are running it on file. So yeah, we're running it on file. We need to run it on HTTP, and for that we need to have a localhost. So this is something which gives us the localhost. So we need serve, which is an npm package, and we are going to do that right now. So what we can do is we need to make it. Where is it? We need to make it. We need to initialize this whole project with npm first, because we also need a package.json, which actually is important for everything to run properly. Because with package.json, we get our whole script and like the configuration for any packages to be able to install on our project. So we are going to do npm init in here, and npm init is going to add package.json and node modules in our whole project folder. Now, what is it? Utility package name. Okay, so it's asking for my package name. I'm gonna name it maybe Mix Central, which should be my, oh, so it's just small letters, my bad. Mix Central, and the version is same description, maybe a PWA demo. And entry point should be index.js, yes, of course. And the test command, nothing required, get keyword, no author. I'm gonna give my author name. And license, I think it's good to go. So yes, if we do a yes, now you will see that it adds a few things. First thing is we get to see this one, package.json. Now I believe you should have a node modules too, but since it's not there, we are going to install a few, the surf package, and it'll be popping up in just a minute. So don't worry about it. So in the package.json, this is what we got installed. This is what got added to our project once we did an npm init. So we have initialized our project with Node. Now it is having the name, version, and all that, which we just mentioned. Now, since I like using Yarn, you can do it with npm. So what you can run perfectly fine. But since I like using Yarn, I have already done an npm install Yarn, which is Yarn is like a sub package manager. It's also a package manager, but to be able to run Yarn, you need to install it via npm. So I have done it already. So I'm going to do a Yarn add serve. If you Yarn add serve. Yeah, so if you do not want to do that, if you want to do it with the help of npm, you can do npm install serve, and that should be perfectly fine. So let that get okay. So that's a lot of things which got installed. So you can see the whole bunch of files that got installed with serve. So now you can see in the dependencies, you'll see serve, and you also see node modules. So if I extend this, you'll see tons of files in here. So that is all the packages which maybe serve is using, or somehow it is being loaded up, or you need these files in order for serve to run. And yeah, that's just what happens when you install any particular package from npm or yarn. So to be able to run this, I'm going to do yarn serve, and we should see a local server up and running in the local host basically. So let's wait for a few minutes, and yeah, there you go. So we have let me extend this a bit. So you will see that you have serve running, and local, you can see it in localhost 5000, or if you already have something open up, you can serve your multiple projects. So if you already have one serve open, one like localhost open, serve will automatically redirect it to a new localhost. And you can also visit the network address, which is this one. So whatever you wish, I'm going to do a control click, which basically will open my localhost, the same project in the localhost here. So right now I'm using the HTTP. So that's how you can do it. And I'm going to close this one because we don't need that. We need it up and running in our local host. So that is how you do that. Now let me go back to presenting. Okay, so now with all of that, we now need to understand the main working of a PWA and how basically what are the concepts which we need to understand before diving into the code of PWA. So we need to understand what are web workers, right? Just a minute. Okay. So we need to understand about threads first. Now, I'm not going to go into very much deep dive into threads, but normally what happens is when you work with any web apps or any web project, there's only single thread, which is the UI thread. So the UI thread is the main thread which handles everything in your application. Now, if you do any kind of a network fetching or something, then it's either synchronous or asynchronous. So we prefer things to be asynchronous because we don't want our application to hang. So that is why people write async and await, right? Because if you do things synchronously, then your application will hang and continue to load while the network is being fetched, or you're loading a JSON file or any API, which takes a lot of time due to bad network, or maybe the API is huge, or maybe it's taking up a lot of load. So that is why we like keeping it asynchronous, because we don't want our UI thread to wait. So that is why it is single thread. If it was multi-threaded, we wouldn't need the asynchronous call, right? Because we do not want, because if it was multi-threaded, one thread working the UI, the other thread will be working on the network fetching part. But that is not the case. So the UI thread is like a single main thread which works. So that's why we want to keep it asynchronous. But with web workers, what it does is basically it's more like an object. So worker is like an object which takes, there's a class called worker. Now, to be able to use worker, worker is an object which is created by the constructor of worker. So capital WORKER, and we are going to look into the code, but that is basically an object of the constructor worker. Now, with the worker, you get multiple threads. So you have multiple parallel threads running besides the UI thread. So what happens is you can use that extra thread or extra threads basically to handle all of the working which you need parallelly with your UI. So maybe things like network fetching, things like, checking if your application is installed, checking if a PWA is being registered or not. So those things are being handled by workers. Now, to be able to work with workers, you also need a global context, which we'll discuss in a few minutes. Now, a lot of people who have already worked with threads or have studied OS will be pretty curious to know that if you are using so many threads in the first place, and what about context switching? What about concurrency? Does things get messy when you use more than one thread? So you are using 3 in this example. What happens if I use 5, 6, or what basically happens to the process? Now, for those people who are curious, I would like to say that don't worry about that, because web workers have very carefully controlled communication points with other threads. So it is actually pretty hard to cause concurrency problems. So if you do concurrent threading, you won't face any problem because they have very controlled communication points with other threads. So one of the main thing, which I think is in the next slide, is it doesn't have any access to the DOM. Okay, so when you're working with threads, this particular web worker, it doesn't have any access to the DOM, so it cannot do any kind of manipulation. So the only connection between them is done through a method which is called post message. So that is why you do not need to worry about clashes or any such thing. So there's no access to non-thread safe components or the DOM, so you do not need to worry about that. Okay. Now that is where how you initialize a normal worker. So you need to create this, in our case, is an object which is equals to worker, which is the constructor, and the name of our worker file. So for this example, for creating a PWA, we call a worker which is called as a service worker. So to connect, to make the two communicate with each other, the UI thread and the web worker, we do something like a post message, and then we whatever we want to send, basically, if it can be a message, it can be an object, it can be a value, whatever you wish for. So if you want to maybe send a JSON file, and then you want to your UI thread to show something with the JSON or do something with the JSON, you can do that using your post message. Now this is just like a console log which says message posted to worker, and that's how basically it works. Now, service worker is a kind of a web worker, obviously. Now, it works on a separate thread. It has no DOM access. It is fully asynchronous, which is pretty great, because if you're working with network, you should basically make it asynchronous and not synchronous, because you don't want your application UI thread to hang, and it runs over HTTP. So that is why we needed to switch it to localhost, because we wanted to test our PWA in an HTTP version. So steps followed by a service worker is all of this, which you see in the screen. So first, this is the life cycle basically of a service worker. So you have no service worker running, then you have install. So when you need to install it manually, though it doesn't get automatically loaded up. So you need to load it up in, maybe for our case, we need to load it up in our index.json file, index.js file. So that is my entry point in my project. So what you need to do is install call, like since I need to say it early on, since service worker is a pretty low-end API, so it's like a pretty low-level API. So you need to push it. You need to tell it what to do. It won't understand itself. So we need to create an install operation in it. Once it is installed, it will either get activated or get an error, depending on whether you've done everything perfectly or not. And if it's activated, it'll be idle. Okay, so once it's idle, then you can call different things. Like you can maybe fetch network. You can maybe do different things which you can do with network connection. So it basically handles XML HTTP requests. Mostly it's XML HTTP requests, but you can do other things as well. If you want to go creative with service workers, you can do a lot of stuff. But yeah, if you terminated it, again, it goes back to idle. And then if you want to fetch something, it fetches the thing. It does its job, whatever you tell it to do, and goes back to idle. So this is basically the workflow or the lifecycle of a service worker. Now, this is service worker in action. So think that you are the user, okay? So you are requesting a site. Now, the best thing about PWA, which I mentioned, is it's offline. So think about it if it's offline, okay? So right now, you have things stored in your cache. So when you're requesting a site, it goes to the service worker first. Previously, it used to go directly to the network. Now that you have a service worker installed in your system, you have it if you notice the previous step, it was installation. So if you have it installed and active, you are going to request a site to the service worker first. Now, if you have things stored up in your cache, which if you're making a PWA, you should definitely have, then everything is available. So return the cache site if available, obviously. But if it is not, then what it will do is, if you have a network already up and running, and if you already have the cache site, that is why PWA is faster, because you already have it cached. Now, if you have something, if you want to request something that is not in the cache, then obviously it has to go ahead and fetch it from the network. So that is what is being mentioned in this part, which is fetch site from network if new version is available. So if something new is available which is not in the static cache, then you have to fetch it, and then that will be returned to the cache and not to the user directly. So why is that? Because if you want something new, then the service worker understands that, okay, the user might need this in the future as well. So rather than giving it directly to the user and not storing it, why not I just store that in myself, and then if the user again needs something like that in the future, I can maybe provide it faster. So that is why you have the service worker running in the middle, acting as a middleman, and then fetching something and then storing it in himself, and then giving it back to the user. So that is how things work basically on a service worker. Yeah. Now, okay, so this is something for which I need to show the the application, the dev tools basically. So let me open what should I open? Let me open Microsoft Student Partner, or maybe it was Student Partner. Yeah. And once it is open, I'll just open there we go. So I'll open this thing so that I can show you a few things. Okay, so first of all, if you open the inspect element tab, which is the dev tools basically, in the dev tools you will see a tons of things. This is pretty important to understand, because with PWA, since I'm going in the core approach of PWA and not using any library such, so we will need to look into this tab, this dev tools. So first thing is we need to go to application, which is our main, which should be our go-to location if you are working with PWA. So what happens in the application is you'll find a lot of things. First, the manifest, which we made, but since this it's not a PWA, it is not using any manifest. It is doesn't have a service worker right now, and the storage is blank. So okay, so we can talk about this one. This is the local storage, which is in our slides right now. So what is the local storage? Basically, let me go back. Okay, so you have two things right now. You have a student partner and you have the Microsoft.com. I believe that's Microsoft.com. Yeah. So you have student partner.this. So there's a subdomain and there's a main domain. Now let me go back to the slide and tell you what it is. So with local storage, you will see that whatever you are trying to do, like for example, if you, I believe all of you know what cookies are. So when you get into like log into any system or just visit a site for the first time, you will find there are a lot of people, there are a lot of, there's a accept cookie option at the bottom of your website, which basically what it does is stores information about you. So the next time that you visit, or so that they can extract information out of you, and then they can provide you content which is similar to what you search for, so that it's a kind of marketing basically. But cookies also can be used for microservices, and that has a lot of application. But what cookie does is only take a fraction of information from you. So that may be around the 5 MB or 4 MB or even maybe in KBs. So I'm not really sure the size. But if you want to do the same thing, but in a larger scope, if you want to store a lot more than just the cookie value, than just the user's information, maybe not 5 MB, but maybe you want to store maybe a very small database information. So that for that, you can use this local storage. So in this case, they have it's like a key value pair. They always store this in a key value pair. So you have AI session, and then you have yeah. So these are the different things which they are storing. So of course there is much more than 5 MB. So that is why they're using the local storage. But it can be as low as it gets. It doesn't matter. But since they thought that it could scale up, so that's why they're using a local storage in here as well. Now it is stored data is available later on as well, and it has greater storage capacity, which I just mentioned. And what is meant by this point, stored data is available later on as well, is if you close this browser by mistake, or like not by mistake, intentionally, and you try to open it again, you will see that this data is still there. So they don't want this data to go away or delete once your browser session is being closed. Right? So if you close the whole browser, not just this tab, the whole browser, and open it back, then this information will still be there. It retains the information. But if you, let me go to the next one. If you have like session storage, which is this one, So if you have like a session storage, you'll notice that these two are the same. So student partner and Microsoft, and so student partner and Microsoft. Now these are essentially the same, but you'll find that in the Microsoft there is nothing, and in the student partner you only have a few items. So this is more of like the same thing, but if you close the browser, this won't be retained. So if you like close it and open it back, everything will be empty. And the more you work on this, the more content you load from this particular session storage, you'll find it gets loaded up dynamically. And then if you close it back, then it again goes back to 0. So that is the main difference between the two. And yeah, so there you have cookies as well. So yeah, they take cookies. And yeah, so now let me go to this one, cache, which is pretty important because we are going to work with this for this session. Now, what is a cache? Is you of course know what is a cache. Whenever you are trying to do something, you go click here and there, and you like something, the storage of the cache gets filled up because they have a feeling that you might go back to the same thing again. So to make it faster, they use the cache storage and those things, loads resources basically, so that you can access it back faster. And now the next slide is about application cache, which is the main thing which we use in PWA. So what is an application cache? Is when you store something, when application cache basically finds things from your main cache, the static cache, and if it is not there in your static cache, if the resource that you're looking for is not there, then it just sends a network request, a GET request from the network, and it fetches the resource which you're looking for, and it again stores back into the application, like the application cache. So we also call it like the dynamic cache because it loads up only when there is something which is not already satisfied by the static cache, right? So yeah, loading resources on the cache is faster and more effective, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, it is much more faster because if it's already present in the static cache, then you do not need to go looking for it, like go fetching for it. So that's why it opens faster. But if there's, just in case if it's not there, if it's not loaded up by the beginning, maybe it's something which requires a network access or you haven't clicked it before. So that in those cases, you use the application cache. All right, so what is next is demo time. So we are going to make our application right now. So we are going to convert, and let me close this one. We're going to convert this thing into a PWA. So let me open up this as well. The cache, and you are okay. So right now you can see the manifest file. Now why is that? Because we already created the manifest file, but you would see there are no service workers. So there's nothing, no worker right now, but we are going to create it. So even for the manifest file, it says that no matching service worker detected. You may need to reload and blah blah blah. It gives this error message. So we're going to go ahead and fix it. So the way we can do that is by opening our project and creating the manifest file first. So let me go ahead and create the for it. So it's called service worker, not the manifest, sorry, the worker file, service worker. So service worker.js. Now this is typically named the same. Don't try and change it because that's the convention of writing it. Now, first thing is we need to check if our application is able to support the service worker or support a PWA. So the way we do it is we check if service worker in Navigator. Okay, so what is Navigator? Now the question comes, what is a Navigator? So Navigator is a object which is used for browser detection mainly. So what is browser detection? Like things like it has information basically. Navigation has a few informations like the app name, the user agent, and all that. So you can try to, if you're using a different language, what language are you using, what plugins are you using, the MIME types and all that. So that is stored in Navigator. So Navigator can provide you with all this different information. Now, if you check it, is my network not stable? Okay, I think I'm lagging out a bit. But yeah, if you check if service workers in Navigator, this what it's trying to say is if my application can support a service worker, and if your application can support service worker, that means you can convert it into a PWA. All right, so now we are going to go into a navigator.service worker .register. So this is the first thing which you do. So you have to register your service worker. So like I mentioned, this is a low-level API, so you need to push everything in it, and you need to make it understand that you want to do all these things. So what you can do is go and register the file name, basically, which is service workers.js. So this is the file which we just created in here. So make sure that you name it as service worker. You can name it any other way, but it's better for your manifest file and for your application to keep the name same, because that's the convention. And if you change it, I don't know how you can change it in this context, basically in this context, because it always looks for a service worker file. So yeah, let's go back, and so we have our service worker.js. Now what we can do is do a console log to check that everything has worked fine. So we can do service worker registered, and there you go, registered. And else, no, it's a try, so it should be catch. Try catch error. So if there's any kind of an error, what you can do is console log and say that service worker registration failed. Yeah, service worker registration failed. And that should be good to go. So that should be more or less the command for checking if your application supports it or not. So if it is supported, then it should be console logging service worker registered, or it should be console logging that the registration has failed. Now let's go ahead and write something for our service worker to be able to understand what is going on. So let me first make a static asset for our static cache. So for things to be loaded up in our cache, we need to create a asset for it to be able to understand what needs to be there in our cache. So we need to push things in our cache. So what can we do is let me add a bunch of files. So these are the files. So what are the files is // is the root, obviously, and then slide.cs, which is this one. Then you have index.js, and then you have the sounds. So I want all the sounds to be present in my application. That is why I'm adding all the things in my static cache. And the next thing is we are going to do self. Now, why are we doing self? Because since it works in a different thread, so it doesn't work with the window thread, right? So normally, if you write any JavaScript file, like for example this one, you will see window. So there's window to add event listener, But in this case, we are not working on a window, so we are working on a different thread altogether. And to access things of a particular class, if you have done any Python programming, you would see that it does a self. So self means you're accessing all the values of the particular class. So that is why you require self in this case as well, because it's a different thread altogether. So we're going to do add event listener, and this is going to be fine. And we are going to look for the event install. So we're going to look for this event, and this should be asynchronous. So we're going to say async and the name of the event, and we are going to do const, not console, const cache. So we are storing things in our cache, and we're going to say await caches open. So open the name of the cache what we want to have. So since this is a static cache, I'm going to call it static cache. And when I add all the files, it should be cache.add all. So there's this method which says add all, and then we're going to add the static asset. So this static asset is nothing but the one which we mentioned above. So we are going to add all these files into a static asset, and that is all that this particular command is doing. So we are going to close this and go back to the next one. So next is going to be add event listener, and now we are going to look for fetch. Now between install and fetch, we already have the activate, which is, if you don't even mention it, that's perfectly fine. But you can, if you want to check it, you can just do a console log. You can do add event listener and then activate, and then do a console log activated or something. But since it's already happens, like it already happens in the middle, we don't need to verify it. Like we don't need to check it like that. But if you want to check it just for educational purposes, you can go ahead and do that. Now we are making a request call. Now what will be the request call is event, now request, request, why is not loading up? Event or request, okay. Now what is this is, since we have already installed everything in a static cache, now if we are requesting for some services, if our service is already there in a static cache, then we'll load that service from our static cache. If not, then we are gonna do the dynamic cache approach. So we're gonna do const request, and then we're gonna do the URL which the user is trying to load. The URL is equals to URL and request or URL. So this is this request which is being given by the event. So we are taking the URL, like we are separating it with basically doing a destructuring. So we are going to check if the URL, the origin, is equals to, we use triple equals to for checking in JavaScript, for basically better checking in JavaScript. So if the URL, the origin, is equals to location, the URL, which is if it's already present in our cache. So location, the URL is targeting this. Where is it? Targeting this. So if it's already present in this particular guy, so you don't need to look for it in the application scope. So what you can do is do event the respond with. So that is the respond with. Okay, so you gotta respond with cache first. Where is it? Cache first, and the request. So cache first is a custom function which we haven't made yet. Else, just copy this thing and do network first. So that is the name of the function which we're giving it. It's a network function, network first. Okay, so if things work fine, then we are going to have location URL equals to a cache first approach, else a network first approach. Now for this to work, we obviously need to make those functions. So let me close this scope, and let me do an asynchronous, async, asynchronous function. What is it? Function, and then call it cache first. So we have an asynchronous function, cache first, and we're going to do const cache response, the response that is being given by the cache, and that is equals to caches match. So match is something of method which actually checks that if everything that whatever is being requested is matching with whatever is present in the cache, then okay, so just return whatever is whatever we have stored in the cache response. So just return the cache response. Where is it? Cache, you have to type it, come on, cache response. But if not, for some reason, if the cache response is undefined, maybe whatever you requested for isn't there in the cache, so you can do fetch, which is a predefined JavaScript method, and you just fetch for the request. So what this does is, what this says, basically this whole function is, if you have things which you have requested in the cache, then return that. If you do not have anything, if it's undefined, then just go fetch for it. And now let's create the async. So let me just copy this for faster development. And that's all the code we are going to write. So don't worry about it. We're not going to take too much time. And this is the last function which I'm writing. So let me delete all this. So we're going to have a const cache for this one, which is the dynamic cache. And I'm going to say await, because since it's dynamic, so things are going to load up dynamically, asynchronously. So you need to await it in order to get all the results perfectly. So we're going to do cache is open, and we're going to name this dynamic cache. Dynamic cache. So we have dynamic cache, and we're going to say try catch. We're going to wrap this in a try catch block. Now the reason is because it might have what am I doing? Okay, so you have a try catch block basically. So in the try catch block, what you can do is use a const result response, and response is a wait fetch of the request which you got here as well. So it should be returned, like requiring the request in here as well, because we are working with the request, so request needs to be there. Now, okay, cool. So now we have a request which is being fetched from the network and stored in the result. Now, to put things in the dynamic cache, we need to call a function called as put. Now this is typically a function which is only used with dynamic cache. Now we need to store it stores a key value pair basically. So the key is the request, and the value is, I would say, response.clone. So that means it's storing the value as a clone of the response that we're getting, and it's returning the response. So let's just do return res, which will return the response. Awesome. So now what it's doing is it's fetching all the things, it's storing that in a response, and we are returning the response and also putting that in the dynamic cache. Right, so in case if there's any error, what you're going to do is return, and we are also going to await. So we're going to do cache.match and request. So why? Is because for certain reason it failed, so we can go back to like a fallback. So we can fall back to our static cache and check if it's not there, and if it's not there, again fetch, and so this thing happens, and you can basically print out on the console as well. So that is all that we are going to do for this one. And one more thing is also you need to go to the index.html file and attach your manifest in order for your manifest to work. And with that, if we reload our application, I think it should be fine, and it should hopefully be a PWA now. And let's see, fingers crossed. I don't want, because live coding never works perfectly. Oh, kudos, we got it. So the reason I said we got it, and without even looking at it, because we got this plus button, and the plus button says install Mixintro. So when you have this plus button, that means that your application is shifted to PWA. And let me show you why. So if you go to Twitter is a PWA. So it says that why is my network so slow? Which says that you can install PWA. There you go. You can install Twitter, and then if you click on it, it'll just show this box which will say install app, and then you can click on it and install it. So for our application as well, if you click on this, it will say install Mixintro and install app Mixintro localhost and blah blah blah. So that's why we have created a PWA. And now if we go back to our cache, we can see that there are two. So right now there's one, obviously, because we have not made any requests, we have not done things, we haven't gone haywire with our application yet. But the moment we do a lot of stuff, we will start getting a dynamic cache, and I'm going to show you how. So we have all the files which we wanted. So we have the root, we have index, and blah, blah, blah. So all these are coming from this. Yeah, these are the dynamic files which we have loaded up statically. Now let me go back. And so if we go to the service workers, now manifest will not give you any error. It will say, okay, your application has registered perfectly. If you go to the console, you'll see service worker registered, which is the console log we did. And go back to our application and go to service workers now. In your service worker, you will see that your application has a service worker now, and this is green, which means that it is activated and it is perfectly fine. Now you have all these different things, which is push, sync, and all that. So you can try different performance, performance metric with your application. You can test it, you can sync, all that stuff. So if you find this is green and says activated, and you have this source equals to service worker, that means your application has a service worker and is already converted into a PWA. Right. So now we need to simulate an offline environment in order for our PWA, in order for us to see that our PWA is working fine. But before that, I'm just gonna play with it a little bit. Okay. So why did I do that? Because in your application, you do not just convert it into a PWA straight away, right? So if you play like if you use your application in your network first and then you offload it offline and then you again use it, then whatever services you have used that are being fetched faster because it's already in the static cache. But since we already have it, it should not matter for our project, but it's always a better option that if you want to access something faster, you should always load it in network first and then convert it, like simulate it in an offline environment. Now if I do offline and reload this, okay, you are not connected. What? Okay, so it's having some issue. Let me check it. Okay, so I think let me clear this out and load it back. So is it because of hosting? Just a minute, let me check this. Okay, so I think there is some error with this, which is pretty weird since, oh, so the cache is getting empty for some reason and we do not have a storage. Okay. Okay, so what is the error? I am updating, I am doing everything perfectly. So you have your static cache. If I use it, if I refresh it and refresh it again, okay, you're not getting a dynamic cache for some reason. And if I simulate the offline, we have you're not connected, really? And okay, network first is not defined. Oh, okay, so I think there's a code error here, and let me check the code. Did I do some typo? Network first. Async function network first. Oh, it's new work, new to work first. Okay, my bad, completely my bad. Okay, not worry about it. I think it should work fine now. Okay, so there you go. That was completely my fault. So you have an offline environment simulated right now. So this is actually working offline. So that's how I can tell you with proof that this is a PWA now, because you can play around with all the sounds, and I hope you can like hear it because hopefully I've shared the audio. But yeah, so you can play around with the different sounds, and that's how you have made your application a PWA. And now if I close this back, oh, let me show the dynamic cache too. So let me go to this. Now yeah, there you go. Now you have a dynamic cache. So the dynamic cache is because in the offline environment, I simulated all these things. So that is being fetched up in dynamically because obviously it had like these things, the background and all that, this were not present previously. So these were fetched dynamically, and that's why you require dynamic cache, and you should have a static cache as well. So whichever works in whichever network, in whichever areas, in whichever use cases. All right, so that's all for the PWA section. Now, if you want to play around with it more, what I would suggest is you can go to this GitHub account. Now, let me go to the MSP Kolkata organization repo, and there you have this one. So I'm going to share this in the chat. So this is the application which I just made. I have already like up and running as a repo on MSP Kolkata. So it is public, so you can contribute to it, and it has all the information which you need. If you're new to PW, you can always check this. So you can check the getting started guide, and you can also refer to this video, and it has all the different commands to test it out. And I also have it deployed on Netlify. So if you run it on a different tab, you will see that you have so you have this, and you would also find it has a plus button which signifies the PWA. Let me show that a little later when it's loaded. So yeah, I'm gonna share this in the chat section. So let me do that right now, and let's do GitHub. And yeah, there we go. So I have sent it in the chat section, and you can see it, play with it, contribute. Let me close this. And there you go. So no, it's still not loaded. The image is a little big, but right now I'm going to show you, I'm going to close this. I'm going to show you how you can deploy the same on Azure. And that is pretty simple and pretty fast, so you don't need to worry about it. Okay, so it's taking it. Yeah, there you go. So there you have it. If you click on it, it'll just install and stuff. Yeah, just if you click on it, it'll install in a windowed version since we did the standalone. All right, So we are going to close this and we're going to go to Azure. So let's go to Azure portal. And now comes the fun part where you can just deploy your application in Azure. And I trust it shouldn't take more than 5 to 10 minutes or 8 minutes. It's pretty simple. So you don't need to do anything. What is this? I don't want to start free. Okay, so go to portal. There you go. So if you go to Azure portal, you will see this one, this website basically. Now what you can do is if you're pretty new to Azure and you have no account, basically, you can log in. You can sign in for a free account. So I'm not going to do it because I already have a student partner account. But if you do not have a student partner account, or if you are new to Azure, then what you can do is sign in, sign up for a free account and give your education institutional email. All right. So for me, I am in KIT University, so I can give @kiit.ac.in. So the academic email which you have, if you sign in with that, you get Azure credits, right? And the Azure credits you get for free. It's around $150 that you get, and you can use those credits to host your websites or do multiple stuff with Azure. Now, if you do not have like an academic email or a student partner email, then I don't think you can log into Azure for like you have to pay. But there are like Azure credits which even student partners give out. So we are going to have an AI session soon in that we hopefully will be giving that out. So if not today, then you can wait for that day. But if you already have an email ID of a student email, like an educational email ID, then go ahead and log in with that and you'll be getting free Azure credits. So I'm going to use my student partner account to log into this, and then we are going to create a cognitive basic what just happened. I'm going to create a, let me go to the portal. All right, so we're going to create a web app basically to host what we just created, the PWA. Okay, so it's taking a while to open. It generally does. And there you go. So yeah, so you'll have something like this. These are things which I was playing with before. So yeah, you have all these different things. Don't worry about it. Just go to this and you can see all the resources, by the way, which you have created in here. So what you can do is type web app. All right, so just type web app and search. Why is it so slow? Come on. It should be showing up, but my network is a little slow. So yeah, there you go. So in the web app, you'll see, click on this one. Okay, so there you have a web app mark in the marketplace. If you click on it, you'll see a new window, which is pretty slow. My network is pretty slow, so you might not see it directly. There you go. So you have this window, and from this window directly, you can start deployment of your application. But there are a few things that you need to cover up before you can actually go ahead and do that. So for the subscription, I have an Azure for Student subscription. You might have a Visual Studio Enterprise subscription as well, or you might have no subscription as well. So for me, I have an Azure for Student subscription. For the resource group, if you haven't created one, I have already created one, which is called resource group. If you haven't, you can go to create new and create a resource group with any name you want, but that name should be available though. So for instance, a details name, the name of your application, basically, I'm going to call it Mix Intro. So this will be the name which is being used for your application to be deployed, basically. So Azure website will be a subdomain. So you need to create a name which is available, and also the name which will be used to deploy the name of your website, which will be used to once your application is deployed. Now publish, it's a code runtime stack. Now this is pretty important. If you have if you're working with a particular stack in mind, like if you're working with ASP or .NET or any of the stack, then you have your choices. But for me, like I use only HTML, CSS, JavaScript. For me, what I can do is go to PHP. So PHP 7.3 should be good enough. So if you are using any other kind of stack just which are not present here, just go with PHP 7.3 or 7.2. I think 7.3 is better. And then you can just go ahead with that and everything will run perfectly. You don't need to worry about it. Now, operating system, I'm using Windows, so I'll be using Windows. If you're using Linux, you can go ahead and use Linux. For region, I'm going to choose Central US because I think the server is better comparatively, and like you get faster fetching and stuff. So work plan is already mentioned for you, and the size and stuff will depend if you're choosing Linux or Windows. So I think it's pretty good to go, and that's all you need to do. Now I will be doing a review plus create. Now it should be any minute now that will be say that your deployment is under review and stuff. Okay, so this gives you a detailed review of what you have chosen. So this is the description and the name and all the runtime and stuff. So you can review it and just go ahead and create. Click on create. Now, once you do that, you'll see that it says the initialization submitting deployment. So once you have successfully deployed your application, you will find yourself in a complete new page, which is the overview page. So the overview page will give you a brief description about your resource, like the API keys and stuff. I believe, yeah, there you go. So it's still under deployment, so it takes a little bit of time. Now, once this is done, you will find your application, the home page of your application, basically on the right side of the screen, and there you will see the name of your application, which in my case will be mixintro dot. Where is it? So still under deployment. So if I do a detailed view, I'll be able to see mixintro.azure website.net. Okay, something's happening here. Okay, it's a Azure website runner, and yeah, there you go. That's done. Now, if I do go to resources, once my deployment is complete, I'll be able to see that right here. Anytime now, my network. There you go. Mixintro to Azure websites.net. Now it is live right now. Let me show you guys that my application is running, but you cannot see anything because I have not put the code in there. So to be able to put the code in there, I will require my GitHub, which if you have attended the previous session though, you are already familiar with Git and GitHub. So Modi took a very nice session, and yeah, so it's this is the default page which says, hey, app service deploy developers. And you need to go to development center, but I don't like going in from here. What I do generally is go to here, deployment center. And in the center, you will have lots of options. So I'm going to choose to deploy it through GitHub. So there you go. I have my GitHub connected. So if you do not, just click on this and it'll say connect your GitHub. So I have my GitHub connected. So what I'm going to do is continue with this. And I'm going to select the first one, which is app service, build service. If you have CI/CD and basically DevOps set up in your project, so you can do a lot of stuff with Azure pipelines and stuff. So I do not know a lot of DevOps. I'm not going to do that. You can do actions as well. So I'm going to go with the basic plan, which is the app service, and I'm just going to go with continue. Now my organization is already selected, which is my name, my profile basically. On the repository, I have my mixintro repository here somewhere. So there you go. There you have it. And then the branch I'm going to select as master. And if I continue, now it should be up and loaded. So if I do finish, it'll be deployed in just a minute. So after deployment, just wait for less than a minute, maybe 20-30 seconds, or just 10 to 15 seconds for everything to be actually loaded up on this website. So this is mixintro to Azure Webs. So if you reload it now, nothing will happen because it takes a little bit of time for Microsoft to deploy it. So yeah, right now it's still not deployed. Now it's still working on it. If I go to overview, I will be seeing another resource which just got created. And all my app performances will be visible here. So in case you are like an analytical guy who likes seeing how many people visit my profile and stuff, my website. So if I reload it now, it should be fine, I believe. It's all, yeah, there you go. So we have deployed our application on Azure as well. And that is how you do that. You do deployment and you create your PWA and you do Azure deployment. Azure deployment is pretty straightforward and it's pretty fun to do. So that is something which you should do because Azure is pretty great and you should use it. And I think that concludes my session for tonight. And I hope you guys enjoyed it. And these are my social links if you have any questions about PWA, if you have any questions about JavaScript or React, because I'm a React developer. So if you have any questions about that or about Azure Web Apps in general, you can ask me in these handles. And thank you for joining in tonight and being a part of this session.